Thank you, Project Van Life Summit, for having me on today as a speaker. My name is Patrick Botticelli and I'm with New Jersey Outdoor Adventures YouTube channel. I've been filming van life tours for several years and I've filmed about 300 full tours, and I learned a lot from my guests on my channel that I hope I could share some of that knowledge with you today to help prep you if you're looking to build out your own van. I have also been in the auto and RV business for over 25 years in sales and service, and I've learned a lot, and it's really going to help you guys along if you're in the planning stages for building out a van. So I'm going to go through a list of some of the things that I compiled that hopefully will help you along in the process. So let's just dive right into it. These are the things to consider before building out your van. So before you build your van, you got to really think about how you intend on using this van. Is it going to be just a weekend warrior? Is it going to be your daily driver that you're going to also use for camping trips? Are you going to do extended travel where you're going to go 3-4 months at a time? Or are you going to live in it full time? There's very different types of builds for all the different types of lifestyles I just mentioned. And the combination and amenities in each one of those builds is going to vary depending on how you use it. So you really got to write a list down and say, this is what our plan is going to be. This is how we're going to use it, so you can cater your van build or your RV build or your schoolie build, whatever you're building out, to meet your needs. And really, it's got to meet your needs. You could see a lot of cool videos on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook about other people enjoying the lifestyle, and maybe you'll get some ideas from them, but ultimately it's up to you on how you're going to use it to best suit your needs. So intended use is going to be my number one. Budget is going to be number two. So not everybody's going to have the same exact type of budget. You got to consider a budget for both the van and the build out. There's two different things there. And we'll get into a little bit more, dive into details on the build out budget. But let's first dive into the van budget. Some people already own an existing van, or a family member has gifted them a van, or they're able to buy a van at a very affordable price. And you could get into the van life lifestyle for $5,000 to $10,000 with just a basic conversion van that you could take the seats and the headliner out and build out a quick camper van for good weekend getaways. So you could get all in a budget for $10,000 to $15,000 and have a really cool camper. But there are other builds and other chassis available that are going to cost quite a bit more money. So you really got to think about, am I buying something used for the least amount of money and being prepared for down the road repairs on the van chassis? Or am I buying something at a much higher price point and doing monthly payments and be able to get a much newer van that might not need a lot of repairs down the road or immediately? Because that could really cancel out your trip. Your plans could be totally devastated if you buy a van chassis that needs repair while you're out on the road. You could even get stranded some places. So you got to think about, between new and used, what you're going to do for a van chassis. Now, talking about van chassis, there's lots of different choices. So depending on how the lifestyle is going to be, how you're going to use it, you could go with a mini type van, like a Ford Transit Connect, or you could go with a full-size van. So let's go with Ford. Ford, the Transit has a mid-range roof, a low roof, and a high roof. The high roof, most of the people would need that if they wanted to fully stand up inside. And then there's different wheelbases and lengths to that van chassis. And also engine combinations too. So you got to really think about, like, the way I use my van that's here is 19 feet long. I could parallel park in Brooklyn. I could parallel park in a little city and go enjoy walking around the city and not have to worry about finding a place to park. So I chose something that size because that suits my needs and how I'm using it. But it is a little bit more cramped inside. But I'm not full-time. I'm a weekend warrior, and that's how I use my van. So what I have inside is perfectly suitable for me. But back to the Ford van. Different wheelbases, different lengths. Overall, you got to really think about how you're going to be using it, how you're going to be parking it, and then what layout are you looking to do? What size bed are you looking to do? Because that's going to dictate what size chassis that you're going to look to buy. Now, there's also Mercedes Sprinter. There's the 144 wheelbase, there's a 170-inch wheelbase. those you have choices. And on 170 is an extended platform, which is 24.5 feet. Can't parallel park downtown, is going to be a little bit tighter in a city and type environment, but you could do a massive bed in the back and have a full bathroom and have a lot of things that are on your list that you're going to want to check off. That chassis offers a lot of flexibility because of the wheelbase and the length. And then you have a very popular chassis, the Ram ProMaster. Benefits to that, it is lower to the ground. It doesn't have a drive shaft tunnel on it, which is pretty cool because it's front wheel drive. So the floor is lower and it's more squared off, and it's even wider on the inside. So that has different, it's a 159 wheelbase you can get. They make a really short 136 wheelbase, and they make a extended and non-extended model. So you could go all the way up to almost 22 feet long on that chassis. That is another consideration. Now, when you're looking at the different chassis, there's different price points on them. Ram, Ford, and then the Mercedes would be the most expensive. So if you're just taking those three as an example, different price points. You get something as low as $45,000, talk about new, all the way up to almost $80,000 if you get a fully decked out Mercedes Sprinter. Now, with the Sprinter, an advantage to that, you could get four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and you could also get that on the Ford Transit. However, the Ram chassis is not available as four-wheel drive. So if you think you're going to go down the Baja or drive it on the beach or go off-roading, that Ram chassis with all the weight in the front might not be the most favored chassis for that lifestyle. You could get away with a two-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive Ford Transit or a Sprinter, or the all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive Sprinter or Ford Transit will do it all. So those are your choices for chassis. Now, once you have decided on the chassis, your floor plan is going to be dictated based on what's underneath, right? So if you're going to do holding tanks and waste tanks, you really got to think about where you place these things in the van, because there could be a muffler, there could be a catalytic converter, a drive shaft, a fuel tank, some pollution device, something that could be under the van that would be in your way. And you don't want to find out too late in the project, if you laid everything out, that there's something that interferes. So do a lot of planning too. You can visit car dealerships and look at brand new ones and take measurements, take pictures underneath to really plan it out before you take the plunge and start planning for this project. There's also used market on those as well. There's a lot that are off lease or 3, 5, 6 years old that are reasonable miles in good condition that you could save a lot of money and buy one of those used. Just be prepared, you're going to have to put some money in it a little bit sooner down the road than if you bought a brand new one. Now, that leads me to funding, right? Because you're going to build out a van, you're going to buy a van. How are you going to pay for it all? So you really have to have a good plan on not only the purchase of the chassis, which you can either pay cash or finance or lease in some cases, but the build out part of it. So you could buy a van, say you're going to spend $40,000, $50,000 on the van, but your build out could be $10,000 to $50,000, even more I've seen online. So you really have to plan, like, how much is the build out going to cost? Then you got to think about, if you need financing for both, how does that work? Because a lot of the manufacturers that build the automobiles, they don't have loans that include the build out. Now, there are some dealers that will work with you and have different banks they can work with that could do both parts of it, but you really want to look into that, because you don't want to run out of funding or run out of money and totally stall out your project because you can't finish it. Now, some people do it over time. They do little bit, and they can still go out there and use it, enjoy their lifestyle, but it's not finished yet. That's fine. If that works within your budget, that's fine. But trying to get a personal loan or trying to get a loan to do the build out part of it, or both combined together, is going to be very difficult on a DIY camper van or with a manufacturer that's not listed as an RVIA manufacturer, which then would prevent you from getting an RV loan. In the RV business, RV loans are available from all the way up to 20 years long. It's financing the chassis and the conversion. And when these RV manufacturers buy the vans, it comes with a title, and they do their conversion and they make a second title. And when you go to DMV, they combine those titles to one. The bank looks at it as an RVIA manufacturer, and they'll finance the whole entire package as one loan, an RV loan. And that is going to be something to really think about. You got to compare what it's going to cost you to build your RV versus what it's going to cost to just buy an RV or a camper van straight out from a dealership. That brings us to another thing, time frame. So say if you plan on hitting the road and you want to get out there in 6 months, but you got to build out your van, that could be a problem if you can't finish in time. Realistically, most of the people that I've seen that do their own DIY builds, if they estimate it's going to take 3 months, it takes 6 months. If they estimate 6 months, it takes 9 months to 12 months. So really be prepared that the project could potentially take a lot longer than you initially thought so. And you know, your van life journey or experience could be delayed because it took a lot longer. And so that really, when you talk about budget and timing, that all ties in together with the chassis part of it. So lots of things to think through. Now, let's also talk about insurance. When you buy a regular RV from an RV dealership, you could get RV insurance that will cover the van and the chassis as one, and replacement insurance. So say you buy a $150,000 camper van and you get in an accident, it gets totaled, it's insured as that RV, whatever manual. Let's just take one example, like Winnebago. You would insure it as a Winnebago Revel, and that has a value. That's what you can get your replacement insurance for. If you do your own build, you have to be prepared. Potentially just the van chassis is going to be part of the insurance, not your build out. So if you did total out your van, you probably are taking all your expensive batteries, inverters, fans, solar panels off the roof, because they're not going to be covered, they're not going to be paid for in your insurance. Some insurance companies might cover the upfit, they call it, up to a certain limit. So if you spent $30,000 in your build, they might cover $10,000 worth of your upfit on the inside, but they probably won't cover the whole entire build out as a camper van. Nor some insurance companies might not even offer you insurance if it is converted into a camper. So you want to ask questions a little bit safe. You know, you don't want to paint yourself in the corner and ask too many questions or too many suggestions, and then you're not able to get insurance. Next thing we're going to talk about is power systems. So if you're going to build out your van camper, you got to decide like what are your wants and needs, what's your expectation of the lifestyle, and what you're going to use. Some people build out vans and they don't put air conditioning on the roof because they feel that they don't need the air conditioning. That's fine. If they do, they have to accommodate roof space for it and not have solar panels in that space so they could put those appliances up there. Also, they have to afford for the budget to buy the item and put it on the roof, and the power system that would power it up. So if you put air conditioning on the roof of an RV, it could be 12 volt DC, it could be 120 volt AC, and if your battery system doesn't support it, then you could either bring a generator with you, or you could plug into a shore power at a campground, 20 amp or 30 amp, even they go up to 50 amp, you could do that. But then you wouldn't be self-contained in that matter when you're talking about just the air conditioning portion. Some people just use two, say, max air fans on the roof, and that is their air conditioning. In my van, I do have a rooftop air conditioner, and I have a 3,000 watt inverter, and I have 12,233 watt hours of lithium batteries. So I could run that air conditioning all night long and not deplete my lithium battery bank. However, on most nights, it's cool enough out, I could just run the fan and have some windows open, be perfectly fine. So decide whether or not you need or want to have air conditioning, and if the budget doesn't allow for it, think about future add-on. Leave a spot on the roof, have the cutout there with maybe a max air fan in it, and that you could then take out. It's a standard 14 by 14 hole, and add air conditioning down the line. You don't want to make the van so you can't add it if you decided to down the road. Then you got to think about heat. I have it's old school, this is a 1997 Airstream B190 van. They built appliances with propane back then. Some camper vans still have propane, but majority of the people that are building their own RVs now use diesel heaters, gasoline heaters, and lithium batteries to kind of power stuff. So if you're going to do a heating system, decide if you are going to do a propane, if you're going to do a diesel heater or a gasoline heater. Like on a Ram ProMaster chassis, it's a gas chassis. So you probably want to buy a heater that it runs off of gasoline, like a Webasto heating system. There are people that have Ram ProMaster chassis that are gas that have diesel heaters on board. And what they do is they have just an auxiliary diesel tank that they would fill when they want to run that heating system. If you go with a Mercedes Sprinter van, most of them are going to be a diesel platform, and then you could buy a diesel heater and tie into the regular diesel feed on the tank, and your 24.5 gallon diesel tank that you have in the Sprinter would also supply for your onboard heat and the engine when you drive. And then the Ford Transit, that's available in gas or diesel, so you have lots of options there. So then we'll talk about the plumbing system, right? So in the plumbing system, some people like to have a water heater or hot water heater, and that can run on propane. They make 12-volt ones now, or electricity. And there's different power requirements for these water heaters. Some of the Bosch 120-volt AC water heaters use a tremendous amount of electricity to run. So if you're not plugged into shore power and you don't have a lithium battery bank that can support it, that could be a challenge. But there's a wide variety of different water heaters on the market that you could use to get hot water on board. Some people do like a tube on the roof and let the sun heat the water, and they do an outside shower. And that leads us to shower. So a majority of the vans, the DIY vans that I see, are different than the manufactured vans. Most of the manufactured vans have indoor showers. A lot of the DIY vans have outdoor showers. So you have to really think, do you really need or want to have a dedicated space in your van for a shower? Or are you going to do the indoor shower with like a laundry tub with a shower curtain that hangs from the ceiling and then pull out the kitchen faucet? That's another way you could do an indoor shower. But you have to think about these things. How are you going to get the water out of the pan? Now you got to get a water pump and then pump it somewhere. And then leads us to the waste part of the system. So most camper vans are going to have some type of freshwater tank, whether they're removable jugs or they have a built-in permanent tank with a 12-volt demand pump. When that water exits out of the faucet down the drain, it should and go into something, right? So sink and shower waste goes into what we call a gray waste tank, and that would get dumped properly at a waste station at a campground or a proper dump station. Toilets empty into black tanks if you have a water style toilet. If you use a waterless type toilet, like a separating toilet, a compost type toilet, then you don't have to worry about black waste, but there is some maintenance you're going to have to do to remove the waste periodically from the container, and a urine jug that you're going to have to empty periodically. So those are some of the things, additional things that you might have to think about when you're talking about toilet waste. And then as for sink, everybody wants a sink on board, but not everybody has to have sinks inside. I've seen sinks that go out of like an outside kitchen area that flips out of the back door, or there's containers that flip out of the back door. So that pretty much talks about the plumbing portion. Let's talk about power. So lithium batteries can get expensive if you need a lot of them. I have a lot of them, and it was a very expensive install, but it met my needs. So you could start off with 1 or 2 batteries, but leave expansion for more as your power requirements grow down the road. Those batteries then would need to be charged somehow, right? So you could put a DC to DC charger that allows the alternator of the vehicle to charge those batteries when you're driving on the highway. You could do solar panels, which I have on my van, which allows the sun to charge those batteries. Or you could do a shore power connection, so you could plug into electricity at a campground or someone's house and charge those batteries. And then some people also do external or built-in gasoline or propane generators to charge those batteries. And then those batteries create DC voltage, direct current, which is like 12 volt for lights and water pumps. But you might want to have an electrical outlet run or air conditioning. So that you would need an inverter. And that takes your DC stored battery energy and it inverts it into AC alternating current, 120 volt. So you could use electrical outlets, microwaves, induction cooktops, and rooftop air conditioners. So that's another key component to that system, as well as fuses and breakers and the wiring. That's where a lot of people fall short on their budget. they price the batteries and some of the components, but they don't realize a lot of the fittings and the cable ties, all that stuff adds up to quite a bit of money if you're working on a full project. So keep that in mind, put it in your plan book when you're planning out and budgeting for this build, that you might want to add another 25% for additional items you're going to need, not only for electrical, but for the plumbing part, the fittings, the PEX tubing. That stuff adds up quite a bit. Now let's talk about layout and bed, right? So some people like to have a fixed permanent bed. So there's the different van chassis, you could do different orientations of the bed and have a regular mattress on board and be very comfortable for overnight sleep, but that does take up quite a bit of space on your floor plan. So some people do flip up Murphy beds, which when you're not sleeping, that's just a portion of your day. You could get that bed out of your way so you have more room to walk around inside, or you could load cargo in and out if the bed folds out of the way. Some people do dinette beds that it's a U-shaped or twin bed looking dinette that doubles and folds down and makes into a sleeping bed at night. Sometimes that becomes a lot of work. It's a chore you got to do every morning and every night to convert it into some type of other sleeping facility. So think about that, give it some thought. I find in like van traveling, if something requires more than 2 or 3 steps, you probably won't do it. So if you are folding down and unfolding the bed constantly, there's going to be a point where you might just say, let's just leave this thing down and travel that way. Then you find you're eating in the driver and passenger chairs or outside because you don't have a dinette. Then you also have to think about additional passengers. Not all people that join van life is 1 or 2 people. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 people if they have kids, and you got to accommodate the dog. So you got to think about additional sleeping space and seats for them to sit on. You don't want a plywood bench with cushions on it and that be your permanent seating for your additional passengers. You probably would want some type of seat belted seat, forward facing preferably. So maybe in some of the floor plans, you want to incorporate like a little mini split bench. A lot of people use the one out of the Ford Transit. Jot that down. They make a seat system that's easy to bolt into the chassis on a Ram ProMaster or a Sprinter. I see a lot of people using it. With that, if you had kids, you could put car seats in it, and you could have passengers sitting forward in a very comfortable position, but safe with the proper seat belts. So think about that when you're laying out the floor plan. And then counter space. My van has too much counter space. It takes up way too much room on the inside. But I didn't build mine. Airstream built mine in 1997. That's the floor plan they came up with. If I was to redesign it, I would have done something a little bit shorter so I had more living space. Because on a rainy day, and you're in the van, there's not a lot of room to do anything. So it'd be nice to have that additional space. So you could mock up your floor plan or your build with cardboard or wood pieces and like camp out in the driveway or just hang out in it and just look and feel and see the height of the countertop, see the height of the seat, see how your portable toilet, whether you're doing a black tank or a compost type toilet or just a porta potty, see how that fits. Does it fit in the cabinet? When the cabinet opens, is it comfortable to sit on? Is there enough room between the back and the wall? Is there enough room on the sides? Is it cutting off the back of your legs? Really plan this stuff out. Cardboard is great. You could buy it cheap if you just need raw sheets, or you could just use boxes and kind of make it into a mock layout for you. So when you're doing your layout, that is going to be very, very helpful. You'll find that some of the things you jotted down on paper or built on the computer change once you get in there and you're actually physically in there. You might rethink it. So another thing to think about is like what materials you're going to use. You're going to use plywood, 2x4s, thin wood strips, aluminum, extruded aluminum type structure. What is your cabinet structure going to be made out? Because if you're using 2x4s, that takes 1.5 inches to 3.5 inches of space every time you use one. So a lot of times, like on a small van, if you're building a wall out of like 2x4s, you have a lot of wasted space there. You could use a lot thinner or lighter weight materials to build those walls. You could just use plywood. You could use 3/8 plywood or 3/4 inch plywood and a pocket hole screw and build a similar wall, but save a tremendous amount of space. And that now leads us into the weight. So you buy a van, it has a 3,000 pound payload, but your van conversion is 2,800 pounds. Now you have 200 pounds left over for passengers, water, cargo. That's not going to work. You're overweight. Not only is the vehicle overweight, your tires are overweight, your transmission's overweight. It's really not going to drive well. So be very, very mindful of weight. Find out what your vehicle's payload is. Open the driver's door, there's a sticker there. It says net carrying capacity or payload. This is how much weight is left after Ram built this van. Jot that down. Now start adding up what all your materials weigh, or estimate what they're going to weigh. Add 10% to that, and that's probably what it's going to wind up being. You could drive to a CAT scale and get the thing weighed periodically as you're doing your build to make sure that you don't go overweight. Last thing you want to do is buy a 1,500 or a half ton and realize that you should have bought the 2,500 or 3,500 series chassis so you would have enough payload to build out your build. So that's one thing with weight. The other thing is balance. You got to think about it, when the vehicle's engineered, it's designed to be somewhat balanced left to right, like driver passenger side. If you wind up putting all the weight on one side, the vehicle's really going to drive differently. It's going to wear the tires differently. It's going to react differently when you pass trucks. On a windy day, it could sway. So really think about weight distribution. I know it might be easier to throw everything on one side and have one side open, but you got to think about, for every pound or two you put on this side, you want to put a pound or two on the other side. Another thing we want to talk about because of weight is safety. I see a lot of van builds out there that don't have proper egress or emergency exit. You want to make sure you have a clear path to get out just in case there's a fire or emergency. Another thing you want to really consider is a fire extinguisher. Not one, but two. Have two on board because they don't look great. People put them way in the back of the cabinet. It's nice to have one out, maybe a smaller one, but then have a secondary one that's much larger. Maybe put that in the back doors, right? So if you really need it, you can pop open those back doors and put that fire out. Another thing is smoke detector, extremely important. If it's 9-volt battery, replace that battery every 6 months. Every time you change the clocks back or forward, replace that battery. If you're going to have propane on board, you need a propane leak detector. You can buy one at any RV dealer or RV supply. Another thing you're going to need is a CO detector. You got to have one. Even if it's an all-electric coach, still put one in because you do have an engine. You could be idling the engine, and you want to make sure that it's safe for you. So also too, if you're going to put racks or solar panels on the roof, make sure you get them down, get them secured properly. You don't want one of those flying off when you're driving 60 miles an hour down the highway. That could be extremely dangerous to the person behind you. So make sure everything's secure. Also, make sure your cabinets are secure, because if you have to hit the brakes really hard, an emergency stop, or if you have an accident, the last thing you don't want is secondary impact. Secondary impact could be very dangerous. If a cabinet or microwave or tabletop came flying out and hit you in the back of your head or your passenger, that could be horrible, right? You avoided that collision, but then something in your van got loose and got to you. So just make sure when you're building it, be mindful, this is a passenger vehicle. It can get in an accident and things could come loose and jar. Another thing I want to talk about is an exit strategy. Life changes, right? It could happen. You could get this awesome job opportunity in another country and you have to leave. Now you got a project that you either started or halfway finished or just finished that you have to sell. So think about what you're going to do with the van when you're done building it and your life changes, right? So that could happen to anybody. Also think about, who am I going to sell it to? How are they going to get financing if it's not an RV, right? So a lot of people that buy DIY camper vans, they come up with their own money, whether it's a personal loan or they get a portion of the loan for the van chassis and come up with cash for the difference. But it might be even difficult to trade in the van to an RV dealership because RVs are based on book value, right? That's what the banks use when they're looking at loan values. That's what they look in for trade-in. So they're going to flip through the book and see what the value is of an RV, and that's what you could hopefully get on trade for. If you do a DIY build, it's not an RV, so there's no RV book value. Book values are done through NADA, JD Power, and RV business. And they're just going to give you the value of what the van chassis is, but not necessarily your build. So you got to really think about that part of the process is the exit strategy. And I see a lot of people selling their own DIY vans, and they do extremely well. But as a buyer, it might be a little bit difficult to buy it if I can't come up with the money, and the bank won't lend you the money for the RV part or the conversion part of it. Also, too, you have to really think about when you're building it for you, think about, like, you might only want to do this for 1 or 2 years, and your plan is to sell it when you're done. Think about like what the next person would want. So when you're building it, maybe you don't want to hyper focus and build it exactly how you want it, because the next person might not want it that way. You might want to follow the trend of other RVs. Visit an RV dealership. Go through the vans that are on their property, regular RV manufacturer, mass-produced RVs, and get some ideas, because that's like majority of the people that buy van conversions buy it from manufactured RV companies like Airstream and Winnebago and Pleasureway and Storyteller, right? So they kind of really figured out a floor plan that works for a lot of people. So if you're going to build yours and look to sell it, maybe get some ideas from them so you don't kind of like paint yourself in the corner with a build that is catered just for you. Well, I hope this list of suggestions that will help you in your journey of planning to build out your own van and engage in the van life lifestyle. Again, I'm only a weekend warrior, but one day I could hit the road in my van, and I love following all the guests on my channel, all the whole van life community, and seeing all the cool things they do, because it gives me motivation to, when I'm at the point in my career where I can peel away long enough to hit the road for extended periods of time. Thank you, Project Van Life Summit, for having me on as a guest speaker today. Again, this is Patrick with New Jersey's Outdoor Adventures YouTube channel. You can see me and visit me on the web at NewJerseyOutdoorAdventures.com, YouTube, New Jersey Outdoor Adventures, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. It's a cool reels that you can watch. Hopefully get you some ideas. Have fun, and we'll see you soon.